I would say tonight's episode is a bit unique in the sense that, the picture I've chosen for the video, what I've written in the subtitle and the title, their parallels are a bit vague, but and of course let me know if the volume and the audio's in tune or not. Anyways, this idea occurred to me, a kind of very unique, I would say, okay, let me say it this way, an idea occurred to me that I had acknowledged before but never in this way, right? And I just thought about, in my youth, where I was a much more simpler person, and I was raised in Iran, and there was a sort of theocratical society there. God was in part of the fabric of the culture, and I remember, especially when you're young, right, you have this notion, it's like the concept of sin has an intensity, and so it's as if there's this idea from, I would say, again, a religious context, that God is watching. And so it's kind of like when a person's really trying to make sense of it, it's as if there's an inconceivable creator. There's an inconceivable source, an inconceivable, let's say, creator God, and this inconceivable God is watching the conceivable creation, right? It's like an inconceivable creator witnessing a conceivable creation. And now, at the same time, it occurred to me that there, in certain traditions, in monotheistic religions, the approach towards God is slightly different. And in polytheistic traditions, the approach to God is different, but their conclusions end up going to a sort of inconceivable source singularity. That means in India, they worship many gods, but it's as if all those gods are within the dream of one absolute God, right? And so, of course, in the monotheistic traditions, they've kind of bypassed the polytheistic requirement, and they've gone straight towards like an inconceivable source to being. And I don't know if many people know this, but for example, I'm pretty sure in other holy books around the world it's like written similarly, but I know of let's say the Eastern holy book, because I was raised in Iran, the Quran is literally in the table of every household, just like there's the Bible, let's say, right, in other countries. But what I'm trying to say, right, is that the bypass of the gods from the polytheistic tradition towards an inconceivable creator, and this idea in the introduction of let's say the Holy Book of Islam, where it says this book is for those who have a faith in the unseen. So you see, it's like people don't realize it, but religion is when a human being's trying to have a relationship not with the known variables of reality, but with the unknown variables of reality. That means, what do we do with knowledge? We analyze it, articulate it, use it. It's as if the scientist wakes up having a great sense of purpose because there's known variables, there's stuff to understand, right? But when certain things go beyond our understanding, the unknown is kind of considered. So having this attitude and this approach that, okay, regardless of what story we give the world, regardless of what book we try to live in, right, that there is unknown dimensions to reality, and to start a relationship with those unknown dimensions, usually for the human species, it has been ceremonial. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, in my youth, I had this idea where God's watching. Now, when I got introduced to mysticism, yoga, and stuff of the sort, there came this idea where I was like, okay, who am I really? The question of who am I became of consideration, and then the question of this idea of enlightenment, this idea of nirvana, moksha, samadhi, and it was as if like my mind was under the impression, that at first there is an ultimate force like watching, right? An inconceivable creator is watching. Then it moved towards more of like, okay, it's like first view, I would say, at least in my upbringing, it was like God made man, and then when you enter, I would say, beyond, when you step out of a religious culture, you get a sense of man created God, right? And in India, it's hilarious. It's not God created man, man created God. It's man is God, right? This is something that people need to recognize, right? There's a sort of commonality in being. In monotheistic traditions, God has no partner. God is like this inconceivable singularity. It's like nothing could be equivalent to it, right? But in the yogic context, it's as if they were like, wait a minute, God gave us a soul, right? God created a soul. Every person has a soul. Then what is the soul, right? And so in the monotheistic tradition, the soul is the mystery of the creator. But when it comes to the polytheistic traditions, right, or let's say yoga, right, it's as if, wait a minute, the soul is our relationship with the creator, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who started American Transcendentalism, his whole keen interest and his attention on nature, right, was all because man, in some sense, has a soul, and when he discovers the nature of that soul, in some sense, he establishes a relationship with, let's say, the idea of God, right? So I'm trying to give the viewers a kind of like how I'm approaching this idea, and that's pretty much what I'm trying to explain, right? That when I was young, God is watching. When I got older, I'm watching God. When I got introduced to yoga and mysticism, I'm like, wait a minute, am I God, right? Or is God being me, or is what is moving every per human being's eyes in this world is like one being, right? Because on some level, the person can be like, why should there be anything moving in emptiness? Why should space have a shape? And by the way, to anybody who is listening to these talks of mine, I'll remind you of a quote from Aristotle where he says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. What that means is like the advanced human being has an ability to see other worlds without needing to change its world, That means you can observe without getting attached. If a person, when I'm saying a concept and they get attached to it, they will become emotional. When a person becomes emotional, their inner realm is more important than their outer realm, so they, the ego separates itself. It's as if like, when the person, when your mind thinks it's a king, it forgets, the voice of the body, the simplicity of the body. So, in my life journey, I'm like, I'll summarize again. I was like, okay, God is watching me. Then I'm watching God. Then it's as if I sat down in stillness and silence in nature. I'm not kidding. Like, this was one of the most biggest experiences in my life, right? Where I've repeated so many times, but I'll say it again. It's like I was on this rock in the middle, in a river, inside a river. Extreme in this place in Canada called Edwards Gardens, and I was just looking at reality, and I was just thinking about my life and just the problems of my life and the hassles and all that, right? And for a moment, in the middle of wondering about what am I going to do in this life, I was like, wait a minute, who is here? What is is it that's looking through my eyes? And I realize that what is looking through my eyes cannot be a concept. It cannot be a subject, because every time I ask myself, who am I, my mind can generate a new answer. So novelty is like nature's backup system, so that the past does not limit the future. In mysticism, in moments of just being the simplest thing that I am, the simplest being that I am, I've come to realize, okay, the prime mover of the moment is not an object, is not a subject, and in some sense there is an additional dimension we have all been ignoring, and it is the collective life of the cosmic activity. Not per se just the collective life of a species. I mean, sure, the New Age community has a sense of kumbaya oneness, it's like no man can doubt love, but at the same time, beyond the simplification of reality into an ignorance of separation, it's as if to me an advanced mind can be separate and collective simultaneously. An advanced future will most likely have this cultivated. That means more and more we're going to see children born who are actually being expressed through global archetypes. That means their parents had a global vision, like they just looked at everything as being a sort of singular movement, and it's as if the genes remember. For me, I'm realizing that the species is behind its universal purpose. Right? This is why in advanced civilization, somebody like a being needs to arise and talk about it. It's like the human species in discovered or invented language, and the moment we invented language, we began creating pictures and systems of meaning for the past, and now the species has been too caught by what its past means that it is under the assumption that knowledge means certainty. But to I would say the ancient mystics and the most advanced beings on this planet, knowledge is not certainty. Knowledge is maybe conditional certainty, but in reality, I would say, think of it this way. Is the world more unknown than known? And the answer is yes. The world is way more unknown than we know it, right? So if the world is way more unknown than we know it, then the smartest beings on this planet are not ones that are convinced by the knowledge, but by those who are staring at the unknown. That means anybody who enters an explorer archetype in the dimensions of this realm, you will become fascinated that in order to be able to see something new or access the unknown, we must be able to see beyond what we have seen. The courage of an explorer is actually the worlds that it leaves behind. So going forth, honestly, it's 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's 8 billion private inner worlds, like inner servers, and there is one physical public server where we're all in. And in the middle of this, we're like what is looking through our eyes and what is seeing us as much as we're seeing it. It's as if God's creation is actually how the inconceivable is moving and watching the conceivable. That means imagine there's an inconceivable inventor, and this inconceivable inventor creates a conceivable invention, and as it tests it out, it watches it and moves it at the same time. I am messing up the audio adjustments for this episode, but I'm so excited to share the ideas that it's like I've neglected the audio quality, but I don't know, hopefully this can be heard. I just reduced the volume to like less than 50% of the music. So anyways, hopefully this is better and I'll continue. The human species, the moment it had access to language, it had access to start new relationships with the unknown. There is a percentage of the human population that looks at philosophy and feels like, the abstract is unnecessary. But the abstract is the foundation of what is accepted as you could say, real. It's like this view that reality is being imagined, and because we are seeing reality, we're forgetting the whole events of imagination. Really, how the nature of the human mind, it's like what thinking is that the brain is creating overlays, layers upon the reality. Imagine you're an artist, let's say you're using Photoshop, and it's like you have one layer of a picture, then you add another, and it's as if like the first layer of the picture of that we saw as beings, as human beings, was the physical world. That means our bodies are here because there's a world here. Now, to the mind, the world is here because the mind is here. You see, it's like we're a multidimensional being. In one dimension, we are less than the mind. We're just matter and stuff in space. In another dimension, we are the meaning of meaningless stuff. It's as if like a meaningless moving periodic table became the stories that move the soul. We are really not just spirits like, in matter. We are a spirit in language. People don't realize this. This is why silence becomes a sort of ultimate honesty. That means if somebody was like Mr.Within, what is truth? It's like, I agree with the Buddha that the first answer is silence. When the Buddha got enlightened, pretty much, he opened his eyes from underneath the Bodhi tree, and beside him was his friend named Ananda. And Ananda just looks at Buddha and realizes something completely different, as if Buddha has become a new being. He has become someone who has seen something in which they cannot return to the previous, So Buddha just silently stares at Ananda, as if Ananda's like, what secret, wisdom have you extracted from the realm? And Buddha's just like, silence. So really, the first answer to what is enlightenment is silence. Then, as time goes forth and conscious, let's say attributeless conscious attention looks at the moment to see what attributes are there, it's as if the eyes, let's say sight is a force, and this force constantly reanimates itself in accordance to what it sees. Children are not taught this, but it's like there is, I'll say it poetically, there is, just like there is like the eyes of our body, the eyes of the mind, which I think in actuality was the true meaning behind what is referred to the third eye opening, What it is recognizing your inner realms. That means the creature is like, okay, where am I getting information from in this moment to know anything at all? The being realizes, okay, I'm in an unknown world. Okay, I'm an unknown attention staring at an unknown world. Okay, my effort creates and animates the meaning of reality. It's as if free will is the handwriting of the divinity behind the mysterious laws of nature. Our eyes are the giveaway of the secret of this realm, how our attention is being. I'm trying to tell the viewers that there's a level of knowledge which has to do with conditions of life. And when we look at who is successful in life, those who in some sense have understood its conditions, they have become conscious. It's like the world is a machine and we're like, how does it work? And our free will is sculpted by our direct experiences into a capability to conceptualize itself. I guess now I can get to the title and say to the viewers that the major idea in this episode, in this lecture, is that if God is watching through our eyes, can we, you can say, watch God? Or here, I'll just read it. Can we access God through watching if God is watching? That means we're like the inconceivable source of intelligence in the world is looking through conceivable eyes at a realm, right? So it's as if it's another way of saying, like, the human being reached a point where philosophically it was like this would be a very advanced checkpoint for the human species, where philosophically we're like, wait a minute, we don't know who's looking through our eyes. What have we been believing when we don't know who the believer is? What have we been, what truths has the mind been fighting over in a mysterious world? Like, this is the bizarre thing, right? All the wars that have happened in history based on the certainty of, let's say, powerful people's inner realms. It's like at some point, the creatures on this planet were so fascinated, so attached to their local meaning of life that they never thought about their universal position. You know, we're living at a time where human beings, everybody who's alive, right? And I'll make it simple. I've thought about it a lot, and I realized that, you know, advanced inner realm piloting can be taught to anybody who knows how to drive a vehicle. And anybody who knows how to play chess. If a person knows how to drive a vehicle and how to play chess, their imagination can be incredibly advanced. But their imagination is left to how much they choose to discover the unique antenna that their DNA is. You know, in the New Age community, there's people who are like, we gotta unlock the potential of our DNA. And I'm like, how adorable, right? You know, where in some sense the mystery goes beyond. It's as if instead of unlocking potential, we're like, we don't know anything. What is there to know? And then the major questions of existence approach. We have to wonder about who's looking through our eyes. I think for most human beings, they will realize it's not a subject, it's not an idea. That means this whole time the idea of the person has been entertained, but it's something that with effort we have required to keep. I think it's something that we have to really consider, even in the domain of psychology, that when a person is tired, their persona is affected by the ratio of how much it can be animate. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? Right? The idea of ourselves is our ego is energy preserved, and when we are tired, it's harder to be the ego. So it's definitely, the ego is like the relationship of energy and generating and keeping the attention on something in the interrupts. Do you see, guys? This is why I feel like I'm strangely kinda. This is like one of the strangest blessings, of conscious sight, that it notices its potential and attempts to activate it. That means, imagine if God was doing a quality check on its creation. We are like, oh, okay, we have a divine audience. Whether this divine audience constitutes of, let's say, angels, transcendental beings, or time travelers even. Every person who becomes more conscious of the realm, the more you know, the more your psyche has to become responsible for the values it projects as the context and extracts as concepts from the moment. I'm like telling people, anybody who in a spiritual context is following a guru, it's as if we have no time as a species for all of us to try to be like the same clone of a supreme being. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like right now I realize that the educational system actually, this might sound very strange, but I have a very, let's say, maverick-like approach to education. Right? And for me, I'm like, wait a minute, education should be the AI Jarvis assistant. Do you know? And so it becomes something where it's as if human beings are advanced beings and they think they need to get educated. And of course, in the context of the linguistic simulation, yeah, education means like you become more aware of how certain zones of manifestation function. It is now the time of the advanced chapter of humanity to begin. That means history has been stumbling like a fool in the darkness to come to realize that, okay, what is free will but controlling how the world moves to some degree. Right? It's as if, like, for me, I'm like, okay, is competing in a power game kind of like the idea, like, should I put myself into a reality where I'm constantly trying to beat the competition? Or should I just realize that this is my view on imagination also, like every person's mind and what the DNA is the unique mountain peak you're standing that no one else is. There's this idea of the philosopher's ivory tower. There's this idea that the human being, due to its inquisitive nature, is designed as a philosophical animal. That means a creature that is not content with the past. That means we are such advanced beings where we were like, the past is not enough. Let me write a sci-fi book, you know. It's like once we have gone through the winters of our soul, it's like the other seasons await. You know, maybe I'll be one of those first people in history to say that the inner realms has seasons. for the first time, we can connect the idea of the nature of how imagination is projected to a sort of seasonal context. It's just, where can the world go? That's really what it comes to. Every person's DNA, their own ivory tower. It's like the advantage of 8 billion human beings that are starting in their own worlds it's pretty much like, you know what it is? We're living a double life. Every person is living a double life and they don't realize it. You know, a life where they are a body in the world, and a life where they are the unknown witness of inner image. The world is too unknown, you know, and it's like all secret if all secrets in this universal sector were revealed, it still would not be enough. We need to increase the speed of our inner realms, and when the way that happens is that the species has to see something so beyond the problems of now that the problems of now, become unimportant. You know what I mean? It's as if like the person's like, society, has its disadvantages, but at the same time, their mind is walking beyond their lifetime towards something, right? It's like, how often in the cosmos does a species appear? And now the species has to use all the intelligence it has access to, as if we're stranded on a galactic island, and we have to fly beyond the unknown edge of the cosmos. Which is another way of saying the species is running a marathon against time to see who wins. And time is the ultimate winner, champ. And now this human species is like, okay, can the species be smart enough to suddenly build the most advanced civilization known to men? This is my vision of civilization 2.0. What is the aftermath of our eyes now? So I guess I can somehow connect this to the idea of, like, in the subtitle I've written, what is it? Ideas on future time travel developments. So as someone who I write science fiction, anybody who writes anything futuristic or science fiction, the idea is that you have seen the destiny of something. It doesn't mean you have seen the actual destiny, but in your inner realms, you have seen a functionable future. Some sort of future. Imagine you tell someone, it's like, when you look at the future, what do you see? And the person's like, nothing, man, I see nothing. And then you ask somebody else, what do you see when you see the future? And the person says, all that I can be. We have to grow up as individuals beyond the names that are connected to subjective masks that are the ego. And so the species needs to acknowledge the human being. Every human being needs to acknowledge that their being is multidimensionally present. Multidimensionality does not mean blasphemy. If you're a religious person hearing me, it doesn't mean blasphemy. Blasphemy is another way of saying anything outside of the first parameters of the set world. Pretty much in a mysterious world, as a mysterious being, we're like, what's up, right? And so when we look up, we see the vision of what is on the earth and the sky. That means I would say this is a kind of technique where if anybody wants to see something in the future, just wonder about everything you see flying or in the sky. For me, one of the most beautiful images is the concept of the castles in the sky, And when I realized this idea existed back in the day because kings looked at clouds for too long. But it's this vision that our lives are not destined to be just on earth. To build civilization 2.0, that's a global effort. Every person has to become capable enough to be free from the mind of the world and their own mind. That means the person doesn't react to reality's change. That means we become watchers of our moment. If somebody says, Mr. Within, what do you think's going to happen after you die or after death? And I'll be like, okay, most likely the same set feeling of mystery I have when I wonder about what I am and what is looking throughout my eyes, whether it's me, God, or the invisible other, the inconceivable other. What it is that the nature of sight is proven. That means if a person had any sort of belief of whether reality is just a physical, existence or, a non-physical experience, it's as if death is another way of saying the mystery of reality becomes revealed. But at the same time, life is a rare opportunity. That means regardless of the suffering in reality, the fact that we're all here now, we are the living performers, in the making of history. On a historic stage, eyes acknowledge the void again. I'm trying to say that it's as if pretty much I feel most likely after death, the person's like, okay, is it beyond an object and subject? Because the challenge of, for me, seeing this idea that God is inconceivable, but heaven is a place, to me that is kind of the geometry of these two ideas is very bizarre to me. That means it's as if God is not in heaven, if heaven is conceptual or conceivable. It could be let's call it, coin a concept and say religious errors or ancient errors. I think this is a great term we can use, right? Just like we have human beings that we can give titles to, similarly, we can give titles to concepts, For me, I want to see the most advanced activation of every human being's life. And the only way this can be done, right? That means even if anybody hears my talks and sees a teacher archetype, you're going to realize it's like the teacher died the moment the explorer was born. It's another way of saying that the mystery of how our eyes are moving is beyond any story. So the nature of man's mind is more like it's an acknowledgement of an experiential multidimensionality, and then the psyche, like the witness. It's a strange thing, but poetically the soul relaxes, in the body as a mind when it realizes that the fear of the mind is abstract until proven. like abstract until proven is like, let's say an AUP, right? We need to create this in, you know, somebody should write a thesis on this, you know, this term, you know. What is soul? What is the soul, you know, other than the permission of something to be here and all? The species will relax beyond it. It'd be pretty much like the way I found that. Okay, so if somebody was like, let's say you're this archetype of an advanced communicator or an advanced designer, and you were like, okay, we have 8 billion advanced designers on the planet. Now, what would be the most advanced thing they can design? The most advanced thing they could design is mastering their inner realms and then contributing to the mastery of the outer realms. And the way I'm using the term mastery is that, you know, after any teaching, it's like novelty awaits. That means I have in my, you know, all the days of schooling, I would say, like, no teacher of mine was like, hey kids, the world is incredibly unknown and the world needs explorers, but I'm going to teach you what previous explorers have found. Nobody puts it in that context. Words give momentum, right? Like, there is a strange affiliation of the concept of, like, the distinction between magic and divinity, right? And it's based on how lesser or higher the self-starting point is. So what I'm trying to say is that when we sleep, we are nobody psychologically. Let's say a dreamless sleep, we're nobody. We just, it's like we logged out of consciousness and then we log in to consciousness in the morning. That moment when we log into consciousness in the morning, it's as if the mind is opening its eyes towards, you know, again, a sequential advanced system of problem solving, right? You know, on some level, like a human being, let's say being thirsty and getting a glass of water may seem like very mundane and simple, but on another level, the mind projected a movement possibility and the body actualized through it. It's another way of saying our minds are living ahead of our bodies, and the speed of attention in the inner realms is strangely superior to how attention moves in the outer realms. That means if somebody, let's say, closes their eyes and visualizes themselves moving faster, like imagine you're walking in the park and you suddenly thought, like, you know, let's say Superman gave you, you know, tapped you on the shoulder and you could suddenly fly or something, you know. So it would be as if the person's mind begins to envision at an incredibly kind of unstoppable fast speed, the person's flying towards outer space. Right? So the mind can envision like an instantaneous, you know, fast speed movement. Okay? Now, when you close your eyes, you can see yourself as your body, or you can just stand kind of rooted and grounded in how that it's just observer present, you know. That means we are the presence of intelligence. I think nobody would deny this. Now, we're the presence of what kind of intelligence? And if you're listening to me and you have somehow managed to step out of the linguistic simulation, that means if life is more than a story to you, these talks of mine most likely will suddenly start glowing. Because it's as if one way is we think we are powerless and we just wait for divinity, and the other side of the coin is to wonder about the most efficient, powerful, and morally advanced kind of civilization. I am telling you guys, to me it's like, you know, if people were like, you know, what would you know, it's like the only gift I want is to see the implementation of the most advanced effort of a universal sector. That means what I want is like not just the human species to just be advanced, but for every sector. You see, it's just the nature of consciousness upon finishing with the games of conquering the outer realm. It begins to realize that the mind is actually, how can I say it, the viewer of the subject is how the free will is working. The idea goes even beyond emotions. It's like we want to see what the most advanced state of being and moment of being is. And in doing so, if there's the consideration of everything we know as not advanced, it's as if we have to let go of the past and just be present until the future moves through us. It's as if it's like the forces of nature. Just like we don't think about our body like our heart beating and it's just beating, similarly there are forces in nature. And it's as if like there is a soul to the idea of man, and then there is a soul to space. Let's say somebody, you know, lived through various ideological systems and at the end of it was just tired and was like, okay, what is the simplest way that reality is being? And through that simplicity, the person began to see where the initial values of life are arising from. And this is what they don't teach you, I think, that your attitude suggests how the nature of, it's like how you've held the antenna. It's like somebody who has a bad attitude, it's as if they're like, why is this person unlucky? Because that's how they've held the antenna of their psyche. And so that's the grand question. how have you held your attention? Not just in the moment, but as the moment. For me, I did reach a certain point in my inner realms where I was like, wait a minute, where is the idea of me? You know, society requires the individual self, but is the individual self an individual self? And it's as if through the gates of, I would say, simplicity, sincerity, honesty, and playfulness, then there comes a sort of state of mind where worthiness has to do with how graceful you were in your life. Because the most advanced doesn't fight. That means the most smartest people, they're not fighting. Do you know? Because the mind, that's the privilege of communication, you know? It's as if wars were happening on the earth as physical events. Then it reached a point where wars were happening through language as a linguistic event. And then it's going to go to a point where wars will only happen in cyberspace. That means that the United Nations at some point will be like, yo, let's just create video games that represent every country's military, and if they want to fight, they fight in the video game. We need an honest use of we need an honest technology. And this honest technology will be stable enough to bring forth an infinite movement. I've reached a point where I'm like, okay, who's watching? Who's looking through my eyes? And it can't be all the thoughts that come and go, you know. It's like thoughts change, the body changes. What can experience the changeless? Or is reality being changeless? Is change being changelessly watched? Excuse me, changelessly watched. If God is looking through our eyes, or if God is watching us, then us watching through our eyes is the closest we come to God. And I think this is what humility meant. That before language became your truth, and an unknown experiencer was there. You know, I think of this concept in spiritualism, traditional spiritualism, of the view of like an out-of-body experience. And I was just looking at the picture of this episode, and I was like, man, looking at the Earth from a space station is like being out of the body of the planet. It's like an out of planetary experience, you know, planetary body experience. You see, if we can look beyond the clouds, we can see beyond the inner realms. That means I think this picture is an incredible metaphor for what I'm talking about when I say inner and outer. Like the language simulation is the planet. And so we're looking at the planet from beyond the planet without losing our naturalness, you know. Losing our natural, I mean, what's the word? Like natural ability. You know, without losing our natural ability. Okay, that's it. You know, I don't know if the future is going to be good or bad. I think it's going to be neither. It's just going to be advanced. And advanced means that it's like the species prioritized in its value system the sincere progress of skill It's as if we were like, okay, let's say in the future, you know, based on certain sci-fi stories, let's say aliens invade in the future. Is the species ready? And let's say there was an alien, let's say like a mental alien invasion. It's like, is the species ready? So what I'm trying to say is like, as unknown beings in an unknown world, we must, we must armor ourselves, and at the same time, pick up the sword and shield of how questions and answers are dictating meaning. It's as if I'm saying, like, it's like a teacher entered a classroom and was like, hey students, you're not students, I'm not a teacher, we're all, explorers in a realm, or warriors in the grandest battlefield that my conscious attention can find, right? The true war is not physical violence, it's psychological positioning. And what psychological positioning means is how much value the attention has unconditionally. You see, this is why I feel when I look at, let's say, okay, I'll say it this way. The Buddha has this, there's the story about the Buddha, just pretty much giving people a context. And the Buddha is not like a name of a person, it's a title that means the awakened one. It's like people called Buddha because he had seen something that nobody in that area had seen, in that area code. Imagines like, the grandson of a village, takes like, sophisticated technology to that village. It's as if he becomes the awakened one, in that village, right? So it's kind of like value becomes the technology to be used. We realize human intelligence is a technology, and then we're like, okay, how do we use it? And then we're like, how does everybody use it? And we come to this conclusion is that there has to be a vision so great that our value system for how we should behave as human beings instantly adjusts. So my strategy is like, we have to see such an incredible future that the past doesn't become the justifier of how things should happen in the present. Right? It's like, what's the point of experiencing a new day if we want to be the same person as yesterday? So there's a question in the chat section. How to differentiate between the ego and the unknown viewer within. The unknown viewer differentiates until it realizes it's just being, and you realize that enlightenment is not an action. It's an instantaneity. So you realize it's as if you were to be the freest being unfathomable, it's like who is setting the definition of that freedom? And so it comes down to this recognition that the true nature of what is looking out through your eyes, or what is within you, right? It surpasses language. It surpasses motion. And so it's as if silence and stillness and other word meditation, it's as if you for a moment forget the stories that you have, the past has given you, and you just stare at the unknown present, and then just discover what novelty means. So what I'm saying is like, forget enlightenment, find a teacher teaching concept, and just be like, okay, I'm a human being that has never existed before. Let me see what this intelligence is, right? Like that's like the best universal definition of enlightenment, to see what is even here that is suffering. Like if the person has problems, like who has the problem, and what is that who, and what do we do when the mind can reproject itself, as ad infinitum in accordance to the energy it has. It's like the privilege of being an evolutionary being is like, after 4.5 billion years, we can notice time. we can, it's as if like history is lives in our imagination, you know, but it's defining the value of the present, which is the reality. So it's like the mind is using an unreal way to project the meaning of the past into what it sees in the present, but that past is abstract. So the act of meaning is a transcendental unknown activity. It's as if when somebody understands something, or when you suddenly discover the meaning of something, I would say that's literally like, you know, the body relaxing into the eyes of the mind, and the invisible mind relaxing into the eyes of the inconceivable witness. It's not my recommendation is like approach any sort of mystery of spirituality in this context where you forget, like I'm telling you, you got to go into a preferenceless state, and you got to, like, it's like post boredom watching the moment, right? And it's as if you just watch the moment to see what is true about it. And you would not only just crystallize your own attention, but then you would realize what is moving that is an unknown variable in the moment. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the idea is that you free your body by noticing your mind. You free your mind by noticing the inconceivable soul. The inconceivable soul is not a content of body and mind, or when I say not, I mean it's more. You see, this is the thing about mysticism. It pulls you, right? It's as if like it's a co-creation between, you know, the nature of an unknown world, you know, and the design of, you know, an inner world of the human. I'm saying, just if you were a question mark, what would you do? And the idea is like you watch. So at some point in watching or meditating or witnessing or observing, whatever you want to call it, you'll suddenly notice the unknown observer, and that's it. You're outside of the language simulation. That means it's like a concept is no longer required for something that is just experientially being. You know, imagine they told someone, you know, are you enlightened? And the person's like, what if I already am? And the guru was like, I don't know what to do now. Right? Because the idea is, how does the attention start? That's another way of saying, like, how does your soul move as a concept in your mind, through the rhythms of the body. I have this view that every DNA projects its own style of manifestation. It's like when you can trust the moment, you can watch how it happens. And it's as if like the inconceivable has trusted mankind, and now it's mankind's turn to trust the inconceivable beyond. It's as if like anybody who had an idea on God, it's like how rude. But at the same time, it's as if the beauty of it is that no idea can touch the inconceivable. For me, I'm like, what are the ideas that I know right now that are about inconceivability? And I was like, okay, God is one, and then the other one is the future. And infinity could also be part of this. But what I'm saying is like, that's the inconceivable. Like, it should be inconceivable for us to acknowledge that there is space, because it's as if we don't see anything there. We just see the absence of thing. And it's like suddenly the person sees the absence of how before their free will as an energetic effort moves, they are not a subject. That's freedom from the language that contains the mind. I don't know what else to say, to be honest. It's just like you gotta sit with your world for a moment and stop being anything to see what you are. This is what I would say. That's how, and what is within you, it reveals in accordance to your own style. It's another way of saying that untruth, and this truth is unconditional. So it means that no story can promise, right? It's all about, to me, I'm like, okay, how seriously do we want to take the world? Do we want to take the world so seriously that we become paralyzed by it? Or do we look at it as if, okay, I'm in the middle of something happening? Anytime I usually, sometimes when my own mind overwhelms me, like when I see something and it's overwhelming for me, I just think of like what a simple being I am. It's as if it's like a being who can be simple is literally the most complex thing. It's like there's a reason Da Vinci says simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Why? Because that's complexity's destiny. So if we start with a simple contentment, then the complexity of our mind becomes like explorations in an uncharted world rather than suffering. It's as if like some problems, or I should say maybe most problems, like an emotion. Okay, let me say it this way. Some problems, emotion is unnecessary. There are some moments, I'll be honest, that I feel like a geometrical entity. I'm not kidding. In my inner realms, there's been moments where I felt I'm just like how, let's say, prana or air kind of moves our soul in our body. It's as if we inhaled manifestation and we exhaled truth. Or exhaled the beyond. That's the beauty of life. Something is here. Regardless of how bad things would look, where like some intelligent activity is happening in this universal sector, and for the sake of an advanced civilization, we have to realize that there has been no greater advanced humanity. The biggest issue on the planet is that we are not confident that we can build an incredibly advanced civilization. And if somehow the future generations are more knowing this, that means if you're a parent, tell your children bedtime stories about how advanced civilization can be. it comes to a question mark, and you stare at this question mark until you realize the nature that it's not that truth is unknown, truth is the unknown. And that's when you're free from any object and subject, and I would say like the mysticism has evolved. You know? Pretty much I'm saying if the mind gives itself a permission to see the least advanced version of itself, why doesn't it give the same instantaneous view? That means imagine you were a person, and in a part of the world where there was racism, right? And you suddenly behaved as if it was like we are global beings, we're universal beings, we're planetary beings. It's like what's the name game for? What's the language throwing game for? It's as if like beyond the language wars, when those subside, the species will realize it's realized. Anyways, guys, I forgot I gotta talk about the subtitle. Quickly, I'm gonna go through this. If there's questions, feel free to ask. The episode's gonna end soon. So let me just summarize and then get to the time travel part. Okay, so at some point through the talk, pretty much this episode, I'm like, what if God is looking at its creation and we look at reality and we don't know who's looking? It's like there's a chance that it's like God is how the soul is, living as man, So what I'm trying to say is like, the mystery of what is looking out through our eyes seems to be an inconceivable source. It's like the concept of God is subjectively an inconceivable source, and us looking at the moment and being like, what are we here? What are we doing here in the middle of, a rock floating in the middle of nowhere? Like, what are we doing here, right? So it's like with that question, it takes us to a point where we have to honor and be comfortable with the unknown. Because if we're not comfortable with the unknown, we are still attached to the previous knowledge. It's like at first you learn from what you can see, then you learn from the seer within by being it. And when you realize you have been the unknown as much as you have been the known, it's like the laughter of the exit of the linguistic simulation is through laughter, right? It's as if when you laugh at something, you can let it go. But when you cry, it's as if your tears are becoming chains to you. Not that it's like we should ignore nature, but I'm saying like be natural. But I'm saying like the mind is how our attention is piloted will suggest the fate of the future generations. And to me, it's like, okay, God is inconceivable, the future is inconceivable, and what if God is how the future is watching us now? And it's like, just like religion says, God created everything and everything returns to God. What if the past is returning to the future? We've been convinced that it has to be, past going into the future, right? As if like it started from the past and it got to the future. But what if it started in the future and then it got to the past, and then from the past it's going back to the future? And what I'm saying back to the future, I'm talking about a future where the species has advanced beyond the language threshold, which is a concept I've designed, and it's a suggestion that we go beyond creaturehood and subjecthood, like personalityhood. We go beyond this. And when we go beyond this, the space for the first time becomes part of our truth. And when space becomes part of your truth, then the question's like, what's the edge of space? And that's your whole moment of awareness. And it's as if like everybody's inside an orb of awareness, and it's like they sit down and are still, they notice the orb, and then when the orb moves there, it's like their attention is free before any idea has, passed through the hallways of their mind, or has passed through the palace of their mind. So, time travel developments. I was thinking, okay, let's say psychologically trying to find if there's a psychological significance to, like, how can time travel be overused? Imagine, just like people can get addicted to drugs, what if, like, the future generations become addicted to time travel, right? So what will happen, right? And there will come probably, like, revolutions to destroy time, and some people, trying to keep it here. And it's pretty much like we have to consider the ethical dimensions of using time travel technology, even though this is a hypothetical idea. But I'm like, okay, let's say somehow time travel machines were made and they were, mass produced in a way where you could go to, like, a grocery store in the future and be like, can I get a time travel keychain? And that time travel keychain, like, takes you back like 2 days or something. And it costs, like, I don't know, let's say, 50 cyber dollars or something. I don't know. Who are you if you don't know who you are? And that's where we find ourselves, the beauty of playing the game of life. You're a player in a world, in a multiplayer online, like in a elemental online game. Some people show off, like, their computer screens, like how HD it is. And the mystics and yogis are like, buddy, like, when you look at life, it's like the highest quality video game. That means the greatest video game we can create is actually indistinguishable from reality. Cyberspace and fiction, they have their phase in history, but eventually the species is like, what the, like, WTF is clarity? Or, if I'm being before I do anything, what does doing anything mean? I want every human being who has heard at these talks of mine ever, right? Buy a notebook and, try to come up with visions of what an advanced civilization would look like. And hopefully, send me an email, or let me interview you on my podcast, Anybody who has, like, a visionary idea about the future, just send an email and I'll interview you about it. And we have to realize it's at the end of reality. Like, who was it? I think it was Aurobindo, or no, sorry, I don't know who it was, but it was like, it wasn't Aurobindo, but I think it was Saraswati on the, I don't know, it was some yogi. And the yogi's advice was hilarious. It was like, just love, the rest is bullshit. That means love is freedom combined with the privilege of advancement. It's like a reality of the original Earth. Imagine we were trapped in simulations of Earth and we're like, what number Earth are we on? It's like, man, I wanted to get to Earth 1 and instead I got to Earth, 101. To be free before the idea of freedom ever existed to you. That's the beauty of mysticism. At some point, you become a friend to your moment. And that's how intelligence activates. Right? And what I mean by this is that it's like, this might sound strange, but a way to tame the madness of the mind. is by treating what is revealed in your inner realms as a blessing, as a gift. You know, when sight becomes a gift, you know, an advanced civilization is how we opened it. So whether, you know, the inconceivable truth is watching us, and whether it's watching us through our eyes, or whether it's the inconceivable future that is watching us, you know, or it's the inconceivable space of how everything's being watching itself. Like at some point the idea of man shakes and the person realizes the limitations of their inner realms, and they become humble in the outer realms. Because, you know, to be honest, it's like reality is designed, or nature is designed, that there is no point for anybody to get away with anything, in the sense that it's just an event. It's like after 4.5 billion years, this long journey on this rock, we're like, whoa, we can do some stuff now, right? And what has occurred is that we are on the verge as a species to achieving the first global recognition. That means it's like some people may have a bad view on the, like there may be a past unnecessary bad connotation on the concept of a globalist, but I'm telling you, it's not just industrial or economic. It's just this view that you wonder about what you are, and when you get the feeling that it's like the species is all that we have, right? Suddenly there comes this strange, you know, caring to look at the world as if, not that it matters based on an abstract emotion, but it's just really, it's like it's going somewhere. You know, it's as if, the bodhisattva's, you know, challenge, right? Where the bodhisattvic mind's like, man, I want the whole world to be free, but at the same time, I want to be free, you know? And what if the whole world, me wanting the whole world to be free doesn't allow me to be free, right? And at some point, you know, it's like the mind realizes that the only way is you are free, and then you free the world. And so to be free means that the person has experienced the unconditional. And when you experience something in an unconditional way, that means you are able to look beyond it. So if you can look beyond yourself, then, you know, just recognize, you know, what kind of advanced communicators the world is waiting for to activate. It's as if, I've used this metaphor in previous talks, as if we're 8 billion, every person's DNA and life journey is like a unique instrument, right? Every DNA is like an instrument, right? And we're 8 billion instruments, and it's as if the only difference between success and failure is how well we played what we had, you know, or what we are. It's like what masterpiece was created by the effort of just a moment in reality, you know? And the masterpiece is really to find a win-win strategy. That means it's like, I don't think it's like we have made the win-win strategy a myth, and people don't wonder about it enough. Yeah. Beyond power games, it's like, what is the source of power? And it's a future that has its the. That means any powerful person that is not helping the future, helping the species advance, it's like, what are you doing? Do you know? It's as if like there's no time. I never finished the thing I was going to say about Buddha, where Buddha was born at a time where there was Brahmanism. So in his search for what truth, how he can find truth or see beyond the suffering of the world, he saw like a bunch of people, you know, from their feet hanging from a tree branch, and Buddha was like, what are you guys doing? And the story goes that those guys are like, we're experiencing God, man, this is our ritual, right? And so Buddha was like, you know, you guys aren't, you know, the holy men, you guys are acting like bats, you know, you're acting like monkeys. That means it's as if like, do you know what I'm saying? It's as if like Buddha was like, wait a minute, what if the freedom from the conditional suffering is not conditional? So the Buddha saw beyond the ignorance of ceremony and ritual and realized it's the quality of how much efforts of decency succeeded. What I'm trying to say is we're in this world to be a person that had never existed before. Right? We are such unique beings that technically everybody is a writer if they choose to be honest. You know, they become an incredible writer. And not just honesty with the outer realms, honesty with the inner realms. You know, let's say, I guess one idea about the time travel stuff. So let's say everybody has time travel technology and some people are bored, right? And you know, and let's say suicide rates stopped and instead people were time traveling to other dimensions and whatnot. Pretty much anybody who's tired of this world will most likely escape through cyberspace or time travel. Like in futuristically speaking. It's just gonna be at some point where we're like, do we have the time for time? And it's like, do we prioritize experiential freedom beyond, let's say, the programming of history? Do we wonder about our eyes as if we are here to notice it for the first time? You know, we're not here to just meet, you know, outer senses of self, but we're also here to meet ourself for the first time. That means it's like, to me, it's the first time I'm being, you know, the human being that I am. Right? It's like there's a novelty to it, right? That's the beauty of the unknown witness. It's like novelty is like, what else could there be if there could be? You know, the best thing that people can do is not like subscribe, comment, or share this talk. It would be like you just care for the species' future and wonder about how your instrument can be played. Like, to me, how an advanced civilization happens, it's like this giant concert hall, and history is like, you know, and every person that has ever lived is like an auditorium, right? And one by one, as human beings are born, it's like master musicians are sitting in the concert hall and they start playing their instrument. And one by one, as they play their instrument, other instruments are added. What if we don't know who we are? I think that's a beautiful moment. A moment where we can discover it all again. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings and namaste.